what is the one lesson from the game that you have learned that you can share with our young rugby players and aspiring coaches?
Yeah, it's a great question because there are so many lessons, and for me, possibly the one that stands out is that the discipline to do the right thing at the right time when nobody's watching, and when you don't really want to do it, and something that I use in my life every day. Get that discipline of getting up early in the morning, going to the gym when it's dark and cold and rainy. That I got from rugby, and that's the one thing that, like, you were in the same school as I was in, at Paul Boys High, and it started there. Really, discipline started at school, but also in professional rugby. If you don't have any discipline, probably won't make it.
I'd love to get into the school stuff and the foundation of that, Corné. But when I was just reflecting on what I've read about you and your career and what we know about you from the outside, it occurred to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'd love to get your assessment on this and see if this is an accurate assessment. But it occurred to me that you captained South Africa probably at the hardest time over the last 30 years. Do you think that's like a fair assessment, or do you think that's maybe inaccurate?
It's a very accurate assessment, to be honest.
Is it?
It was in a transitional period. Nelson Mandela was released from prison in 1994. I matriculated in 1993. So the year after I matriculated, I went to study a business management course, and I was chosen for a South African under 19, under 20 team, and we went to a Junior World Cup. And what happened was the old national anthem of South Africa had been banned. It was called the Stem. And so we went there, and they were still working on Nkosi Sikeleli. And we went there without an anthem. So when everybody was singing their national anthems, we had a minute silence. It was a very interesting time. And one of the first, let's call it what it is, a quota player, was on that tour, and it was very difficult to manage. It was just an incredible time to be part of it. To stand there and for a minute silence and then run onto the field and still win. We actually won that Junior World Cup because New Zealand wasn't there, but all the other teams were there. But New Zealand, I didn't know why they didn't take part in it. But it was in France, and we managed to win. So it was there already. That's where my journey as a captain of let's call it well disputed teams started.
It's and then sort of fast forward in that period of 2002, 2003. I mean, you were right at the forefront then of making those changes and instrumental to a change in, I guess, mentality. And that the thing that stood out for me is your strong leadership and this mental fortitude throughout that time.
Yeah, there was no other option to be honest. It was a time of really where leadership was massive, and one of the greatest leaders of I think of all time, Nelson Mandela was luckily in that same era. So I had the real privilege of spending time with him, getting phone calls from him, chatting about changing the country and how sport has the ability to change the country. And if you look in that corner there's a photo of my family with him. So there were all these tough things, but there were the really nice things as well. Spending time with the greatest leader of all time was really special.
Incredible.
Corné, I remember that period back in the day, when you were captain, and it's not easy being a captain of South Africa. And, you still got to focus on your performances as well. And you're all as a rugby player. And I think this is especially for the younger generation. If you want to get a great example, of what aggression means, just go check out some of the highlights. I still remember back in the day at Newlands when I was still a Western Province supporter, which I'm clearly not today anymore. Let's just be clear about that. And my dad used to drop me off at the games, and I would be in the standing seats watching. And I still remember put on this massive heat playing for Western Province, and it was always unbelievable to see. But leadership, with that, it's not. I believe some people are maybe born with it naturally, but it's something that can also be developed over time. But what was your tools that you had available back then? Because you were a brilliant captain, Corné. And when you spoke to players, though you could see they would listen, and when you would come to the school as well, speak to us as young students, aspiring rugby players, you really connected with us. But what would you say was the key for you back then? Why you were such a successful captain? When I'm talking about success, we're not talking about results. We're talking about the person you were and the path that you laid for the players that followed you.
I think there are a few answers to that question. My journey started when I went to Paul Boys High. I went to Paul Boys Primary first at the age of 3, at the age of 4. So my parents were still in Zambia, so they were 3,500 kilometers away. So I stayed with people for a while, and then when I went to high school, I went to boarding school. But I turned 5 in my grade 1 year, so which means I was 2 years too young for my grade. Oh. I was held back. 2 years later, I was held back, and then I held myself back in grade 11. So I spent a lot of time with Paul Boys and Paul Boys Primary. But I think that not having parents to guide me or parents that could protect me, I was always the one who I had to look after myself in a way. And I think that teaches you to be independent, but also to lead, because sometimes if you want to create your own environment, you have to lead people into that environment. And I forgot his name now, but the guy who picked me as a captain when I was, to be brutally honest, a naughty little shit. I really was. I was the ADHD kid who could not sit still. I was all over the place. And this guy had the vision to go, let's try and give this guy a bit of responsibility, and maybe let's see what happens. And that was under 13. I became the captain of the under 13 Cradle League team. And since then, I never played in a team that I didn't captain. It was just one of those things that once he gave me responsibility, I took it so seriously, and I really developed as a leader over time. But again, it comes back to that discipline. If you want to be a leader, you need to set the example on the field, off the field. When you at training, you have to show the way. You have to run in front. You have to be the fittest guy in the field. I wasn't the biggest, and that's why I needed to be so aggressive, as you alluded to earlier. I played my first professional game at 87 kilograms. I played for Western Province, my first game. 87, my son is under 16, he's 78, and he says to me, Dad, I need to weigh 85. And I said, no, wait, relax. There's lots of time. But, because I wasn't a huge guy, I really had to play on the edge of very aggressive, and also sometimes stepped over that line, which I'm not proud of, but it was just the way I needed to play.
Corné, you just say there, and when you say it, you were not a huge guy, and that's why you needed to be aggressive. It's unbelievable hearing that. So, and I think we always talk about it with Ben. Like each rugby player needs to find his own unique path in the game. Playing towards his strength. But I think what really intrigues me is that you were not maybe the biggest player, but where did that aggression come from? Is it the fact that, and I think maybe also before you answer that question, giving people insights what it means to be in a boarding school. Because I don't think, if you look at a lot of the youngsters today, they get everything on a platter. I'm talking about guys that go through the academy system. They get their meals given. Everything's done for them. They get their planning set. It's like they're really living a life of luxury. But I think maybe, firstly, give maybe people some insights to your experience in boarding school. And then secondly, what fueled that aggression? Like seeing that you were not the biggest rugby player. Like, I mean, a lot of players would be smaller, might be, but scared. They would try and avoid contact, but you were actually looking for contact.
Yeah, boarding school definitely made a difference. It also makes you tough. Nobody to complain to, nobody that you can say, look, the food's not great today. But you just eat. You eat because that's all there is. There's no other option. And even now, my kids moan. They say, "Dad, can I have Uber Eats because the food's not great today?" It's tough enough. Sort of, just take it on the chin. Yeah. And so boarding school really, part of that, being away from home, seeing my parents every 6 months, that all that, molded me into a relatively tough individual, emotionally tough, but also physically. I always trained really hard from school days. I always wanted to be the fittest, and so that aggression, part of that aggression is my hate of losing. I really hate losing till today. Should I play table tennis against my wife and she beats me, I'm pissed off for the whole day. But it's still, and that's something that I hope I haven't passed on to my kids. But because you've got to be a good winner and a good loser, part of the 3 pillars in Paul Wizar is good sportsmanship, and we saw that this weekend with the unbelievable kind of great sportsmanship. So yeah, as I said, my aggression was always on the edge, and I often stepped over the line.